And we're away. Hi, Nicola. Welcome to
Hey, Pete.
the episode 3 of the Dialogues. How are you?
Very well. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for joining us. I'm excited to have you because the last 2 episodes have been a bit general in terms of diabetes world and in terms of like focusing on CGMs. We had Jane last week and she gave a big broad brush about all things diabetes and CGMs. I'm excited to talk to you because you're a bit of a guru in the world of Medtronic Guardian, and I have to say, like, the terminology around Medtronic in the CGM world is a thing that I'm still trying to get my head around, like all the different names of all the different instruments and devices in the Medtronic world. But it's exciting to have you because of your perspective and your experience in the diabetes space, and as a patient who wears a Medtronic device and has a lot of experience in that space. So really keen to kind of pick your brain about that. But before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of Medtronic and Guardian and so forth, tell us a little bit about your diabetes history, you know, how long you've had it and, you know, all the fun and exciting things that come along with it.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could say I was diagnosed a little bit in the mature age group. I was 23, so I wasn't sort of, you know, really young when I was diagnosed.
Yeah.
And I went through the typical process, you know, of wearing of just finger sticks and pen injections, etc.
Yeah.
And then went on to a pump. So I did pens and injections for 10 years.
Yeah.
And then I went on to a pump and wore just a pump only actually for quite a long time. And then I went on CGM only 4 years ago. So I've probably had more experience with pump than pump and CGM, and more experience with pump than pens. So, and I've always been on Medtronic. So I've always, I started with them. They were amazing to me in the beginning. I was like a bridging the gap patient. So I didn't have private health insurance. And they very kindly loaned me a pump until I got that sorted. And so for that reason, I've sort of always been a Medtronic supporter.
Did you say Megatronic? Or
Yeah, Megatronic.
Megatronic. I've never heard that one.
Medtronic.
Yeah. That's nice of them. What instigated that? What instigated them wanting to give you a free pump back then?
Yeah, I know. It's very, it's a nice thing to do. Hey, so for me personally, and I guess it's the same for everybody, you know, there comes a tipping point which makes you think, oh yeah, I think I need something better, or I need to make a change. And for me, that was wanting to be a mum. So I wanted to have babies, and I knew that to do that, you had to have really, really good control. And it's not that I had bad control, but I just knew that it could be better.
Yeah.
So thankfully at the time I was quite good friends with my Medtronic representative, and I started talking to her, and then I changed my mind, and, you know, I kind of went back and forward for ages, as people do with diabetes, trying to decide, you know, to make a change.
Yeah.
And then eventually I just thought, no, it's going to be the best thing. So because I didn't have private health insurance, they kindly loaned one, which is what they do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Very kind of them. And actually, were they one of the only players in the CGM pump market back then? Was there a competition?
There was, and I can't remember the name of it, but I guess at the time, and even now, you know, that they were sort of the most well-known, and they had, you know, the most research behind them, and they just always seemed to be the bigger player.
Yeah.
So I felt probably more comfortable
Yeah.
going with that. Yeah.
And how has it impacted your diabetes management and life in general? Having, when you went from, I guess it's been a while, hasn't it? So how long have you been on it for now?
Yeah, I've probably been on it now for about 15 years.
Wow. So you probably don't remember what your
Yeah.
life was like pre
Yeah,
wearing.
I do. But I guess the thing is I'd never change it. Like, looking back, I would never have it any other way.
Yeah.
Where at the time, like, it was a big move. Like, at the time, I really had to think about it. And all the things I was worried about back then just seemed so silly so quickly after I went on a pump.
Like what
So, like wearing something constantly.
Yeah.
And I was always worried about that. And then, a month or so into it, I'd forget I even had it on. I'd get in the car and I'd be off to work, and then I'd be like, oh, have I got it? So you forget these things so quickly.
Yeah.
I guess it's just that fear of the unknown. And then you just very quickly adjust and you just go, oh, I wish I'd never left it so long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, looking back now, I wouldn't have it any other way. I couldn't. I can't even go without CGM now. Like, I don't even like going during the warm-up when you have to wait for it to recharge. I don't even like that.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Wearing a Libre, and I really try and avoid any period where I don't have it on my arm anymore, because I really like the availability of information.
And you just feel so much more secure, hey?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I actually find it interesting. I do, out there in social media world and in the community in general, I do come across people who actually talk about having breaks, holidays from their CGM, because it somehow causes them to have an overload of information and causes them to have anxiety, or just to kind of need to feel like they distance themselves a bit from it. I don't personally have that, but I certainly hear about people out there in the community who do have that. Have you come across any of those?
Yeah, I have. I've had those conversations too, and I'm like you. I'm the opposite.
Yeah.
A lot of people have pump holidays.
Yeah, that's it.
Where I've had a time where I've had to be off a pump for a couple of days, and it was terrible. Like, it was really hard. It's hard to manage your diabetes when you don't have all of the, the reassurance and the gadgetry and all of the information that's going back and forward between the pump and the CGM that keeps you just so much more stable. Whereas, going back onto injections, I found really, really difficult. So I would rather wear all the technology. My husband says, like, I'm plugged into the matrix.
Yeah.
But I'd rather that any day.
Do you want to talk us through a little bit about, almost from the beginning of, like, the setup that you've got, so the pump and the CGM, and kind of some of the technical basics and how you put them on, and so on and so forth?
Yeah. So as you know, I'm on a Medtronic pump. It's the latest pump, so it's called the 670G.
Yeah.
And it works in 3 different modes. So essentially, I could wear the pump just as a pump only without CGM. I can wear it with CGM and just have that suspend before load feature, which I had for a long time before the 670 was available.
Yep.
So that was kind of my old pump. And then my latest pump I can wear in auto mode, and that's what I do. So with that, what I do is I have CGM, which talks to the pump and sends my CGM number every 5 minutes to the pump.
Okay.
And then the pump's algorithm decides, based on what I am at the time, in relation to its target. So it has a target in it where it's trying to consistently keep me at 6.7. And so depending on where I am in relation to that target, it delivers what's called sort of like a micro dose every 5 minutes to try to, if I'm higher, it gives me a little extra. If I'm lower, it might not give me anything at all.
So
And it
it's
uses
actually it's loaded with sugar as well.
What was that?
The pump is loaded with a glucose of some sort.
No, just insulin, but it's just going off what my blood glucose level is to try to keep me at a target.
There's something there about Dextro. I thought what you were saying was that if it's going low, it might actually pump in some sort of like sugar.
Oh, no. I think something like that might be in research. I don't know, but no, it's just it might not deliver anything at all. So if I'm going low, it'll just not deliver any insulin at all for a bit. And then if I'm starting to recover and travel back up, you know, it might start up again. So it's kind of like this constant feathering up and down of little tiny doses of insulin. And that's the background, and that's how it deals with the background.
Yeah.
And then whenever, as far as eating, it's the same as what the pump has always done. You tell it what your blood glucose level is, you tell it how much you're eating, and then it does the maths to decide, okay, well, you're this far away from your target, so I'm going to give you this much for that.
Yeah.
But you've got so much still on board, so I'm going to take that away. And then you're eating this much, so I need to cover that as well. And then it does that maths and then delivers that amount of insulin. So it's got.
Okay, so you're not actually having to you're not having to bolus yourself. You're not having to decide. You're not ever having to decide how much insulin is being injected.
Yeah, you do. So that's the bit that you still do. Yeah.
Okay. So you're still giving yourself a certain number of units when you're having to bolus with food.
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah.
And so like hypos, do you still have hypos?
Very, very rarely. And to be honest, the only time I'll have a hypo is if I don't have CGM.
Right.
And that's obviously because everything kind of goes back to, you know, like the old way of doing it, you know, like my preset basal rates.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, that's exactly why auto mode and the 670 came about, was because no 2 days are the same, and you would know that so well. Like, you know, one day is definitely not the same as the next, and definitely not the same as the next, and your insulin levels change every 5 minutes, just like your blood glucose levels. So really hypos are only if I'm off CGM.
But you never get your bolus right to a point where you like for example, if I have whatever, like say I have a bowl of pasta,
yeah,
and I will give myself some Nova Rapid, and occasionally what'll happen, I'll give myself a unit too much and I'll have a quick hypo, then it'll probably come high later on. Do you still, that's still a problem?
Well, no, not so much, because with a pump, it's unlike what you can manage with pens, it's working out how much insulin you've still got on board that's still working. So it's taking a bit away, so you're less susceptible to going low.
So it actually reacts that quickly. So it like literally will pick it up really quickly and stop delivering the micro doses really quickly. So you just avoid. And is that a key kind of, is that a key benefit to pumps or Medtronic pumps particularly, is that ability to quickly adapt when you're going low? Is that kind of one of the key selling messages with it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Yeah, because like I don't know, I guess there's lots of bad things, or that you could say the worst thing about diabetes is hypos. I mean, there's other bad things about diabetes too, but I think it's probably the worst. So a lot of trouble to try to avoid what is seen to be our biggest bugbears.
Yeah.
And, you know, for ages now, Medtronic, like I had suspend before low, and and it was amazing, you know, but now it's better.
What's suspend before low?
So suspend before low is where it used to predict that you were going to have a hypo.
Yeah.
So it would know where you are, and it would know where you were headed and how quickly you were dropping. And the pump would suspend basal insulin, so it would switch off the background. And that worked really, really well. And I thought that was like awesome. But now with auto mode, it kind of does the same thing. But rather than predicting, it's just kind of constantly doing that every 5 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
So hypos, probably the only time hypos are an issue is if you over bolus. So if you miscalculate carbs and you give yourself too much, then you have too much insulin on board that will still drop you down lower.
But it just sounds like you probably need to take, like, the room for error is greater. So, for example, as I just said, like if I take 1 unit too much with a bowl of pasta, I'll have a hypo probably. Whereas it sounds like with this setup, you maybe need to take 2 units too many in order to hit that hypo. So more room for error there. Yeah,
you'd have to probably miscalculate a fair bit, because it's knowing where you are all the time, and it knows when to switch on and when to switch off. So I guess it's just a little bit more aware of what's happening with you, whereas without a pump, you inject it and that's it. There's no taking it back.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. Do you know, is that the case with other CGM pump setups, that corrective ability?
Medtronic, we're the only ones, or that one's the only one on the market at the moment. But other pumps do similar things, just not to that extent. So pump therapy, oh, there it is now. Pump therapy, that's my pump.
What's it saying?
I'll tell you. It's saying I'm high.
Okay.
So what I'll do now is I can correct. So that's the other easy thing. So
How do you do that?
How do you do it?
Yeah, what's the process to correct? Do you give yourself some insulin, or do you dial it?
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that number, which I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm going to put that number in, and then I'm not going to say I'm eating any carbs, because I'm not. So I'm just doing a correction.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bypass the carb bit, and then it's just going to give me an extra 2 units.
Okay. 2 units. And what is this acting that you've got on board?
So it only ever takes rapid acting insulin. So you don't.
Anything you want, though. You can choose what you put in there.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So I use Nova Rapid, and always have. And so that's the only insulin that goes in the pump. So you don't need Levemir or Lantus or anything anymore. You just use one insulin.
Yeah, cool. That's pretty cool. What about, are there any downsides to it? Do you ever get annoyed with it? Is it, do you like if you go swimming, or I don't know, is it playing sport, things like that?
Yeah, you do. I mean, you get sick of diabetes anyway, you know, like sometimes you just, I guess the downside would be alarms. I guess I try to change the way I think about alarms if they're annoying me, because it's not like the alarms aren't telling you bad things, they're just telling you things to do. And that's a good thing, because if you do it... How many alarms are you
blocking in a day?
Oh, not that many, but like sometimes if you're having a bad day.
Like what's a good day, what's a bad day?
So today, for example, that was the first alarm I got.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the first time it's alarmed.
Okay. So
Whereas sometimes, say again?
One a day is a good day.
Yeah. I mean, that's easy.
Okay.
But having said that, like some days I might get 4 would be probably the most.
Okay. Yeah,
4 or 5.
Does it wake
and
you
for
up?
various things.
Does it wake you up?
Yes and no, like it can. So the various alarms can be, like I just got an alarm to say I'm high.
Mm-hmm.
You can get an alarm to say you're low. You could get alarms to ask you to do a blood glucose level. You get alarm to say, things like your battery needs changing, or to change your reservoir, which is cool. So it tells you every 3 days when it's time to change your reservoir and set. So that's quite helpful. So that's what I mean. Like, they're not bad alarms. They're kind of good alarms.
Yeah.
And the only time you really get annoyed with them is if you're having a bad day. And you're going to get annoyed with anything if you're having a bad day.
Sure.
So
yeah, that's
I try to look at them as a good thing rather than a bad thing, because it's helping the bad thing.
And what's well, a couple of questions. Well, I'm curious about like what's next. I suppose all of the CGM medical device companies are looking to kind of progress their products to improve our lives. Are you aware of what's next with in terms of technology improvements or changes? I mean, they're all getting smaller and smaller that I'm noticing anyway. So I guess that's one thing. Do you know much about the future when it comes to Medtronic?
No, I do. Yeah, you're right. I think they're always working on trying to make things smaller and sexier, because I mean, wearing a black box is not particularly sexy.
Yeah. And is that,
So
when you say wearing a black box, so you wear is that the black box that clips onto your belt or something, is it? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I don't wear a pump, so like it's all a little bit, yeah, okay, cool.
So
That's
this
the
is the
670G.
yeah,
Gotcha.
and then you've got like a reservoir of insulin that sits inside it.
Yeah.
And then it talks to a little. I'm not going to
That's
show
all
you
right. You don't have to show
CGM
me that.
because it's not on my arm. And it talks to a little sensor and transmitter, and they talk together every 5 minutes. So that's all you've got to wear. And then you've got a blood glucose meter, which when you need to do your calibrations or finger sticks or whatever, you just do it. And it also talks to the pump. And then all of that gets all downloaded into a software package as well. So you can, read your reports, and you can link to your doctor, and they can, my doctor, we've even Zoomed. So she can have my reports and we can have a talk about it. So it's all really amazing like that. I think for the future, I think they've worked so hard on their pumps. I think, they've always tried to be at the forefront of pump technology. I think the next thing they would like to make them probably smaller.
Yeah.
And CGM, I mean, they're always working on that as well. So, but the reason why the 670 is they're sort of, they're pretty ahead of the game.
Yeah. So I suppose if you were out there and wondering about a pump, like what are the main things to think about? Like what are the main pros and cons, I suppose? I mean, we've kind of covered some of them, like the alerts help you and the lack of hypos and things like that. But if there was someone sitting on the fence, like so for me, for example, I'm not quite there yet. I don't. Yeah, it's not really. I mean, my HbA1c is okay. Yeah, I have the odd hypo. I could probably have less. I definitely could get it a little bit better, and I'm pretty sure a pump would probably. But I think for me, it's that gap. It's like the gap's not big enough between where I'm at with my management versus what a pump would deliver. So I'm not quite ready to kind of have that attachment yet. But it's on my mind because I'm in the kind of community now and I'm talking to people about it. I'm definitely thinking about it more. And I'm sure there'll come a day where I just go, stuff it, give me a pump, and I'll see what. And I probably should trial one day just to kind of get a sense of what it's like.
Yeah. And look, I think, I was like that. You have to be ready. You have to make your decision and be ready. And I wonder sometimes whether or not there is a tipping point where, like, you make that decision and then you want it yesterday.
Yeah.
I guess the biggest reason, because as I said, you don't wear all that gadgetry unless you're going to get something out of it. And that's the best part, is I just find I think a lot less about day-to-day stuff by wearing a pump and CGM, because I feel really confident that it's doing what it needs to do and I don't have to worry so much about it. Whereas I found with pens and no CGM and, you just don't know where you're at, and it left me feeling really unsure and it kind of messed with my confidence.
Yeah.
And especially, at the time, like with work, I was driving a lot and I was having to present and my job was really busy, and I used to worry about everything and feel guilty about a lot. And I think that's been the biggest thing for me, is I don't feel that anymore. Like I feel really confident that I'm not going to have a hypo talking to you now. Like before I would have really stressed about that, and I would have eaten 50 million jelly beans before we got to talk because I wouldn't have wanted to go low. And
wow.
So I think confidence is a big thing for me. Control is probably the other thing, and hypos would be another one.
Thank you. So just, I suppose, in getting close to wrapping up, is there, and given that you've kind of worked around the diabetes space for a little while, is there any interesting patient kind of scenarios that pop to mind? Any kind of interesting experiences that you've seen other patients have?
On a pump?
Yeah, pump, CGM world. The reason I ask is that I just was thinking about an example that we had last week of a particular patient who went onto a pump very late in life and just had great results.
Yeah. I've never known anybody to regret it. And there are funny stories, like you talk amongst your mates and, where you kind of get your pump cord stuck around your steering, your gear stick, or, you put your seatbelt on and it's all wrapped around it, and, or you walk past a cupboard and you kind of, pull yourself back on the cupboard. Like there's all those sorts of stories. And, I guess you do have to think about where you're going to put things, summer versus winter, like in summer, you're obviously not going to wear it as much swimming, or, as in winter, you don't have to worry so much. So there's lots of things, that funny stories and things that people share.
Yeah.
But I've never known anyone to regret it.
Thank you so much for giving us time today.
Thank you for asking me. I'm absolutely rapt that you asked. And I can't wait to go on a pump.
Yeah. I'm sure I'll get there, and I am sure it'll probably be a Medtronic pump in saying that.
Oh, awesome. Well, it'll be nice for you to join the club.
Thanks so much, Nicola. We'll speak to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Pete.
Take care.